When I say the name Courtney Smith, what comes to mind?
Extremely difficult situation, a very troubled marriage, a situation that I wish I had known more and wish I'd done more.
Why didn't you know more? We'll get to the do. Why didn't you know more?
Well, I knew what I knew. I knew that in 2009 that there was an incident, and I was led to believe by both parties that it was not domestic violence, that it was that Courtney was very upset with Zach for drinking, and they were a very young couple, and there were no charges, and they came back to, we recommended counseling, marriage counseling for him.
When's the last time you spoke to Courtney Smith?
I have not spoke to Courtney Smith in a long time.
How long?
I can't give you exact time or date.
Years ago.
Yeah, it'd be a couple years ago.
Why haven't you spoken to her through this?
I was never really close with Courtney, the family. When the investigation took place, I was told to stand down and not get involved. That's one of the anytime you hear of something, whether it be a student athlete or something like that, you can't tamper, you can't get involved with an investigation.
When's the last time you spoke with Zach Smith?
Last time I spoke to Zach Smith was the day I fired him.
How would you characterize your relationship with him?
I haven't spoke to him since, and it was strictly work-related. It was, especially since I've been back at Ohio State, it's been, the coach is coach, and when we're off, we're off. We don't do many things together.
How has the relationship with him changed over time?
Oh, it's changed drastically now that I'm made aware of some of the recent events over the last month and a half that I found out about.
How has it changed?
Disappointment, embarrassment at times when I started reading about some of the things that took place that I was unaware of.
Whose embarrassment, Urban?
Embarrassment for him and his family first, but also Ohio State, myself, and everybody involved.
Why embarrassment?
Well, some of the things that came out were things you don't even want to talk about on television. My awareness of Zach's issues were mostly work-related, almost all work-related. All the reports came back to me, very messy divorce, custody issues. I saw a guy's production drop, and I made a commitment to try to help. And obviously, I look back now, went too far in trying to help someone.
2009, while you were at Florida, Zach Smith was arrested by the Gainesville Police Department after he, quote, allegedly picked up his wife and threw her against a wall. This is in the investigation's findings. What did you do about the arrest?
I believe it was the next day I found out about it, and both parties came to see me. I asked about it, and I was told it was not domestic violence, that she was very upset with him for drinking.
Per the Ohio State report, as you say, you told investigators you met with Zach and Courtney Smith in your office. She denies ever meeting with you, Urban. Zach Smith says he met with you alone. How do you reconcile that discrepancy?
All due respect to the report, I remember talking to both parties. That's all I can tell you is it was quite a while ago, and I remember getting the story from both parties.
What do you remember her telling you?
I can't recall exactly. I remember that both of them or both parties explaining to me what had happened that night, and that there were no charges, and that it was not domestic violence.
Given the 2009 arrest, Urban, you left Florida after you returned to coaching at Ohio State. What reservations, if any, did you have about hiring Zach Smith again?
I wanted to have someone with some familiarity to my offense, and Zach seemed like a guy that was doing very well. And I checked on him, did background checks with the coaches he worked with. It came back very high, very high marks. And so I made the decision to hire him at Ohio State.
How do you view that decision now?
Oh, bad decision.
Why?
Oh, just obviously I've been replaying this thing in my mind for the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And at the time I thought I was doing the right thing. I've always been a coach that is, whether it be a student athlete or I've had staff members have issues before. But I've been one of those coaches that when I see someone that's having issues or in distress, my entire life has been go try to get that person help. And I did that. And obviously, I'm being suspended for that I went too far and tried to help this guy. All the later information, the latter information has come out, like I said recently, yeah, this was a guy that should not have been on our staff.
What did you tell your boss, Athletic Director Gene Smith, about the 2009 arrest when you hired Zach Smith at Ohio State?
I recall I didn't tell him. It was 2012. We were putting together a new staff, and a lot going on during recruiting. And I can't tell you my exact mindset in 2012 when I was putting the staff together. I knew we'd do extensive background checks on everybody, and that was it.
The background check came back without the arrest, but you knew about it. Why not tell him?
In hindsight, I should have.
Why didn't you?
Once again, I can't recall why. That was several years ago. I just can't tell you exactly what my mindset was at the time.
After you arrived at Ohio State, you put your core values for the football program on the wall at the Woody Hayes Center, printed in all caps for everybody to see. What are the first two values?
Honesty is number one, and respect women number two.
Through the course of these events involving Zach and Courtney Smith, how do you think you honored those values?
I still hold those values so firm, so strong, and I apologize for the perception that I don't. You know,
You apologize for the perception. What is the perception?
That as a result of this investigation and this situation, that I did not take that seriously.
For the perception. What apology, if any, for the actions, Urban?
Also for the actions. You know, it was a very tough time, a tough situation that Courtney was in, that Zach Smith was in, that we were led to believe was a very difficult divorce and a lot of things going on. And I erred, Tom. I erred, and I made a decision to do the best I can to help stabilize that situation. And one of the things, I look back now, I probably should have fired him. But when you see the young kids involved, and just the way my mind works, it's always worked that way. When I see the situation, how best to do this. If I knew it's domestic violence, he's out. He's gone. Non-negotiable, you're finished. When I get the information back from the people following the investigation that it was not domestic violence, my mind works, how do I help stabilize this thing? How do I help stabilize these two young children? The best thing I can do is get this guy that seems to be not operating at full capacity here, and let's get him counseling. And over the years, we've had tremendous success with players, and to the point where I've been criticized over the years. We're giving a player a second chance, a third chance, and it's hard for me to just pull up on that. And I look back now, I have a different mindset. But at the time, I really believed I was doing the right thing. I was trying to help stabilize a family.
On the first core value, honesty,
Yes.
a few questions. Again, according to the investigation, late fall 2015, Courtney Smith shared her allegations of abuse with your wife, Shelley, including a number of photographs. Shelley called the police department seeking more information, and it's reported she texted back saying, in parts, Urban, "I am praying for you. I know the truth. Just want you to be safe. Do you have restraining order? He scares me." Why do you shake your head?
The first time I heard of those texts were just recently, in the last month. And I was asked the same questions. You know, why did I, because Shelley did not share those text messages with me. And she shared her reasoning for not sharing with me. And once again, it was her reasoning. And I just think for all parties involved right now, for me to head down that road, and I don't speak for Shelley, but she did not share those text messages with me.
What did she share with you about the allegations of abuse?
Nothing about allegations of abuse. It was about her. She's a very compassionate person. And like I said, her reasoning is her reasoning. I do recall about her concern about the children and a very messy divorce that was going on.
What is her reasoning
to the best that you can state it and share it. I'm sorry, Tom. I just, once again, I don't want to speak on behalf of Shelley, and I don't want to disrespect anybody involved and the families that are involved. How satisfied are you with that, sitting where we are now? I know my wife. I know how compassionate she is. I know how great she is. I know what a human being she is. I'm very satisfied with that. How do you feel you handled what happened in 2015? Well, 2015, here's exactly what happened. The athletic director came up to me on the practice field and said there's a domestic issue between Zach and Courtney. I was very upset, and I said, what do I need to do? And he said, nothing. Let the investigation go on. You can't get involved in this. We'll update you, and we'll let you know. And I saw Zach Smith, and so did Gene Smith, and I said, if there's any domestic violence in this, you're fired immediately. Do you understand that? He said, yes. He goes, Coach, I never did that. I never would do that. We're getting divorced, and this is about our children. And Gene Smith made it very clear as well. If there's any domestic violence, you're fired immediately. And then the season, it was right in the middle of the season, if I remember right. The season went on, they updated me along, and then they gave me the conclusion. Looking back on it, did you do enough? At the time, I thought I did. Looking back now, when you take 2009, you take 2015, it would have been a very hard thing to do, but I would have fired him.
Why would it have been hard?
Well, there were no charges. There was no arrest. It was coming back to me, it was not domestic violence. But there was enough red flags, Tom, that I should have reacted. But once again, that's a hard thing to do, you know. How far do you help a guy? And how do you help the family? I just kept thinking, I see these little kids around all the time. How do I help stabilize this thing? I look back now, especially on such a serious subject as domestic violence, I would have fired him even without a charge or without an arrest. Because there's too many red flags. You speak of the red flags. 9 different police reports, Urban, involving one or both of them over 6 years. What did you know about the reports starting in 2012? 2012, nothing. Not one time was I made aware of a report until a month and a half ago when this was going on. The natural follow there, Urban, is what does your not knowing say about the culture of accountability in the program, the culture you set? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not sure who knew. Matter of fact, when I got the phone call or the text message about the felonious assault arrest in 2015, I asked my staff, I asked support staff people, what are you aware of in 2015? I'm unaware of this. Tell me, because I need to know. I don't want to be wrong for the media. And I get the phone call back, Tom, saying there's not even a police report. We can't find a police report. We can't find an arrest. There's no arrest. All that's on his record is his divorce and his a recent trespassing situation. And that's, you know, I don't know how people keep arrest report. This is all news to me. And you have a good question. How do I, you know, the culture of a program, I would expect, and that's something I have to do a better job of. Everybody should feel comfortable coming to me if there is a situation that's obviously as serious as a police report between a man and a wife. And I was not made aware. I don't know how many people even knew about those, though, because I asked, and everybody came back and said there were no police reports. When did you fire Zach Smith? I fired Zach Smith in July of this year. The night he was fired, according to the report, Shelley texted you, saying in part about Zach Smith, quote, afraid he will do something dangerous. It's obvious he has anger/rage issues already. Given her feelings in that text, Urban, what steps did you take regarding Courtney Smith's safety? I remember calling her after that text, and the concern was that he was going to hurt himself. And so I believe we contacted his aunt to monitor him, to make sure he's home, to make sure he's okay. That's what we did. What steps did you take regarding Courtney Smith and her safety? Just to monitor Zach Smith at that time. You did not reach out to Courtney Smith? No. Big Ten Media Days. The press conference, July 24th, Urban. The report ultimately concluded that you, quote, misstated your lack of knowledge regarding the alleged domestic violence by Zach Smith in 2015, and you, quote, made misstatements. What's the difference
between a misstatement and a lie?
I made a mistake. I did not lie. In my mind, I'm a lot of, I don't lie to people. I don't lie to people. If you're going to ask me a question and I incorrectly answer the question, or I misspoke, or to me, there's a big difference. And once again, I apologize for that. I've always had a decent relationship with the media, and I'm very forthright, almost to a fault, that I'm going to tell you how I feel. And I erred at media day, but there was never one time when I got asked a question I was trying to mislead that person that was asking the question.
What role did your comments at media day, do you think, play in where we are right now?
I think a lot. And
How?
I think there's probably a perception that I did try to mislead people, that I tried to not be forthright about everything I knew about the Zach Smith, Courtney Smith situation, which was not the case at all.
Per the report, you expressed concern to a staff member about whether the media could get access to your phone. Why?
I don't recall the exact conversation, but I remember that.
This is what the report says.
Right. I don't remember exact conversation, but it was brought to my attention the media would maybe have access to my phone. My comment was, I don't worry about what's on my phone. There's nothing there that I'm worried about.
What concern did you have about the media's access to your phone?
I had none. No concern whatsoever.
From the report, you also discussed how to adjust the settings on your phone so text messages older than a year would be deleted. From the report, why?
During the investigation, we were asked many times about the deletion of text messages and the change in the settings. And I made it very clear that I did not delete messages off my phone. I made it also very clear that I don't understand how to change a setting on my phone. And the report also says that they couldn't tell if there was.
Yet the report says your reactions in the report's findings indicate, quote, consciousness of guilt.
Yeah, all due respect to the report, there was no consciousness of guilt about what was on my phone. None.
The report is wrong.
Once again, I'm just telling you if you're asking me if there was consciousness of guilt on Urban Meyer in regard to text messages or deleted messages, or there's zero, none.
In your view, why were you suspended?
I asked the same question. I was of
To
the
who?
president, and I wanted to know. And I wanted to know that if there's anybody in this university that thinks that I would turn my back on domestic violence, I need to leave right now. The people that know me, my family, my closest friends, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank people I've worked with in the past. I'm very clear on my view of life, on my view of people, and domestic violence is at the forefront. I can't stand when I see it. I can't stand when I hear it. For anyone at this university to believe that Urban Meyer would turn his back on domestic violence, I need to leave. And I asked the president, I asked one of the board members. This is after the fact. And after the fact, it was made very clearly, Coach, it says right here in the report, we also, if we believe that you would have turned your back on domestic violence, you wouldn't be our coach anymore. And number one finding in that was that the investigators found out that they're impressed with our core value, respect to women, and how hard we teach and how much we believe in that. And that if Coach Meyer ever thought that any support staff member, any coaching staff member would take place in domestic violence, he would be terminated immediately. So it's very clear my stance on domestic violence. I was not suspended for that. I was suspended because I mismanaged a very troubled employee, and I went too far to help him.
What was your reaction when you found out you were suspended?
Devastation. Devastation. My focus is on, did we follow protocol and did I lie to me today? When the report says yes and yes, or no, yes and I did not. But now that I've had to, once again, play this thing over in my head a million times, I did mismanage a troubled employee, and I went too far in trying to help someone that had work-related issues and too many red flags. So I take the suspension and move forward.
How would you characterize the punishment?
Firm, harsh, tough, but I did make a mistake with Zach Smith.
Fair is not a word you used.
I would say fair, yes.
In the press conference on August 23rd, you read a statement. How would you describe your demeanor?
Exhausted. I was there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I sat in a room for about 12 hours, not knowing my future. Actually looking at a window, and I could see the team practicing across the street, and I walked in there and obviously didn't do a good job.
Why did you face the media?
That's a good question, because we had a press conference. And we just, my understanding is we wanted to get everything behind, the report was out, the punishment was in, let's move forward and go. And
in answering the questions, how do you think you came across?
Exhausted and not with much compassion.
When asked what message you would have for Courtney Smith, you never mentioned her name. Why?
I apologize for that. I can't recall exactly why. Like I told you, my frame of mind was not in a good place. The combination of exhausted and not knowing my future. But I made it clear the next day or next 2 days that I was very sorry. And I am telling you right now, I'm very sorry. The Courtney and her family have to go through what they went through, especially when this thing started being brought out in the media for their children and for her, and I'm very sorry.
What are you sorry for, Urban?
I'm sorry that I really believed at the time I was doing the right thing to help stabilize that family. I really did. The best thing I knew once domestic violence was off the table and I was told this is what it was, how do you help this situation? If I fire them, how do they support their family? And I made a decision at that time, Tom, to go and to get him professional help, the best I knew how to do. And I thought for the most part it worked. In hindsight, I would have made a change. I would have fired him.
A week later, you issued another statement on Twitter. After media day, a press conference, a prior statement. What still needed to be corrected in your mind?
The perception was out there that I was suspended because of domestic violence. And I want to be as perfectly clear to the world that Urban Meyer does not condone, would never allow domestic violence. Never. And I wanted that to be out there. I wanted the truth to be out there. A lot like we're sitting here today. I want the truth to be out there. The truth is I made an error, Tom. I erred in supporting and trying to help a troubled employee. I did not err. If it was domestic violence and if I believed it and was told that, that would have been severed immediately.
How do you square that with people having seen the photos of Courtney Smith?
It's hard.
I know it's hard.
Very
How
hard.
do you square it?
I didn't see the photos until a week ago or 3 weeks ago. If I had known there was domestic violence, I would have fired him.
What responsibility did you have to know?
Throughout this conversation, I think it's very clear that as hard it is to even know what goes on in people's personal lives, especially with something as serious as domestic violence, I need to know and act appropriately.
How did you act?
With the information that I had. Oh, that's hard because there were so many red flags that now that I look back and even after the fact, the things I didn't know that came out, I should have acted differently. But at the time, deep in my heart, I thought I was doing the right thing.
Looking back, what would you do differently?
Looking back, as it's 2018, I don't know if we got much further than the 2009 incident. Absolutely no tolerance. I don't want to hear what I didn't do, what I did do. If there's a red flag, I'm going to ask more questions, especially about something like this.
What's your message to Courtney Smith now?
I am sincerely sorry that you and your children had to go through this. And had I known more, I would have acted differently. My intent was to try to help not just her family, and the best way I knew was to get this guy help so he could stabilize and support his family.
Courtney Smith says you chose to help the abuser and to enable the abuser. What's your response to that?
And that breaks my heart. I didn't hear that until just now. That's, I apologize that she believes that. That's never been my intent. My intent was to try to help all involved. The only way that I knew how at the time. And I had two choices: fire a man and really put a family in upheaval financially, et cetera, or try to stabilize someone so he can go up and be a good father.
What apology, if any, have you offered to her directly?
I didn't talk to her directly, and maybe sometime I will, but
Why not?
wasn't allowed to.
Now,
That's something I have to think through,
what do you need to think through?
how to go about doing something like that.
When it comes to the program's core value of treating women with respect, who respected and protected Courtney Smith?
Oh, that's a tough question. Now that all the information's out, now that I've learned more, at the time I thought I was. At the time I thought the best thing I could do with a very troubled marriage, with a child custody issue going on, and I really thought it through. I thought the best thing I could do is try to help stabilize this thing. If I fire him at the time, sever that relationship, and I see these two young kids, that's, and that's the way I've always thought. How do you help stabilize something? And at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing.
And what do you think now?
I would have released them back in 2015. I'm not sure how much that would have helped. Obviously, the relationship there was severed at the time, and they were divorced. But my understanding was that, I would see the children all the time. I would ask periodically. I understand they would get along fine. And I wouldn't get too deep in asking, but I would ask. And my understanding that everything was worked out.
Who should have protected her?
Who should have protected Courtney? Well, ultimately, Zach Smith should protect Courtney Smith. The law should protect Courtney Smith. Her friends should protect Courtney Smith. And those people that are aware of a situation should protect Courtney Smith.
After all this, why should people trust you?
I've had a long track record of caring for people. I've been, criticized at the time for giving people too many chances. I like to believe in people. I like to believe that, especially people from bad backgrounds and troubled situations, and they're caught between a rock and a hard place. There's been years and years and years of success of helping people through hard times and getting counseling and working with people. And there's been a few times it hasn't worked. And that's a fine line. I've had these conversations with colleagues of mine recently. When's enough's enough? When you're talking about a student athlete or a staff member that's going through a hard time.
Beyond firing Zach Smith, what changes moving forward?
I've worked on, and Gene and I have talked about this, making sure I create that atmosphere that people are, even in the busiest of times, you guys know this, during the football seasons, it's intense, it's chaos, it's recruiting, it's 24/7, you go home, sleep for 6 hours, you're back at work. I want to make sure I create that atmosphere. If someone behind the scenes knows something that's very serious, or even they perceive as serious, they need to be able to, my doors are always open anyways, come in and tell me this is what's going on. That's something I'm working on right now.
What message do you think your return as coach at Ohio State sends to women?
Well, I wanted to do this interview. I wanted to make sure, I think there's been a time period where people believed that I was suspended because I turned my back on domestic violence. And that shook me to the core. And it shook my family to the core. That my dad or my husband, if he knows about domestic violence, he's been preaching since I'm 54 years old, as long as I can remember, that there's no second chance with that. And that's the message I want to get out, is that this was not about me turning my back on domestic violence. This is about trying to help a troubled employee that I made a mistake. If there was domestic violence, I repeat, instant termination.